Our refutation is against the new and youngest Christian apologist by the name of Jonathan Mclatchie. Let us go on to the next point of the article he mentions. Then he mentioned something about the Abu Bakr, where he hit Aisha. There's a hadith. But I mean, Aisha was the daughter of Abu Bakr. Something happened, and Abu Bakr popped his daughter. I mean, no one encourages violence against anybody. Islam doesn't encourage violence against anybody. But, I mean, there is discipline. You discipline your children. You discipline your family. So, this is natural. It's a natural occurrence. Islam is coming and giving us the guidance on how we deal with these things to make sure that nobody is oppressed. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the hadith, he says that I have forbidden oppression from myself, that I don't oppress any of my slaves, and I've also forbidden oppression from amongst you, that no human being should ever oppress another human being. So if this is the guidance and the principles by which Islam gives us to live our lives, then how is someone trying to imply that Islam allows women to be beaten and oppressed in their homes? This is further from the truth as the East is from the West. Let us get on to the next point because time is moving fast and we are longer than we want it to be. The Quran permits rape of female captives. The Quran permits rape of female captives. This is very sad when you see these kind of things brought up, especially by Christians. As I mentioned earlier, as a general principle, Islam dealt with situations that occurred at the time and didn't shy away from them. It didn't shy away from them. Now, quickly on this point, there's something called what the right hand possesses. What the right hand possesses. And in that time, during the time of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in a medieval time, early on, there were captives that were taken from war. And the men captives that were taken, if they were not threats to the security of the state, then they were either ransomed or they were held for some time until the ransom was granted, or maybe they became Muslim and they were eventually freed. As for the female captives, if the male captives were taken or they were slain in the battle and they left behind daughters and wives, then these wives became the lot of the state. They became the responsibility of the state. This is reality. You had a war. In the war, many casualties occurred, and because of those casualties, now the women who are widowed need somewhere to go and somewhere to be taken care of. In that time, there was no system in place like we have some type of place. Even today we have the problem with refugees and the like. But definitely at that time, there was no organizations like CARE or the Red Cross and Blue Shield and things like that, which would come in and handle the amount of people, captives that were left over from war circumstances. So Islam, the Quran, allowed the men who were in battle to take those female captives as what is called right-hand possessions. And if they took them with the responsibility and the trust of treating them kindly and treating them as wives. They took them with the responsibility to care for them and to treat them as wives. Although legally they wasn't considered to be the wife, they shared the same status as a wife. The difference is that they didn't have a contract as the wife had a contract. And the reason they didn't have a contract is because they were acquired through the means of captivity, through war, as spoils of war, when the other person was acquired as a free person through a contract that was made between two people for marriage. But nonetheless, this is what Islam presented for these people so that they can be cared for. If you don't have anybody to care for them, Then these women are left to the desert. They're left, to be deserted, and they're left to be killed and molested by who knows who and what. So Islam said, take these women as your right hand possessions, but care for them and give them the same rights and status that you would give to the right wife. You have to provide for her, you have to feed her, you have to clothe her, you have to take care of her. And this is the case if you have any kind of relations with her. This is the case. Or you can ransom the person, meaning they're a captive of war. And if someone wanted, there was a family member that wanted to come and say, listen, I will buy their freedom. Then you ransom them and take the monetary ransom and they will be free. So this is the reality at that time. But the idea of the people mentioning sex slaves and to also say rape them, this is just untrue. The position in Islam, and this is mentioned by one of the great scholars, Imam Shafi'i, quite early, he said, if any man took a woman by force, a female captive, by force without her permission, and it took her sexually, then she will be made to go free, and he will be given the punishment of the person who committed adultery. This is early in the books of Islam from what we find from the Quran and the Sunnah about this situation. But there's no doubt that Islam has given the man that opportunity, and this occurred at that time under those conditions. In today's time, it's a different condition. You have facilities and institutions that can accommodate and house these women and captives of war, so there's no need for the society and to have women taken by the participants of war when they can house and take care of these women. They can be given to places, refugee camps, to house and help the women get back into society and establish themselves. Given that reality, then the application of right-hand possessions do not apply as it applied back in those days. And this is the reality, and this is what the scholars can conclude from the fiqh of Islam. But he's mentioning an ayah where it says success is really obtained by the believers who concentrate their attention and humbleness. Listen to the qualities it's given. Listen to what it's saying. Success is really attained by the believers who concentrate their attention and humbleness when offering their prayers, and who keep themselves away from vain things, and who are performers of zakat, who give to charity and the monetary stipulation, and who guard their private parts. This is exalting people who have very high qualities and very high character. They guard their private parts. They protect themselves, except from their wives. Their wives, those who they're married to, or from those bondwomen who are owned by their hands, who is called right-hand possessions. But these people are not out there sneaking behind their wives and sneaking through the back door and having promiscuous relationships, as we find dominant in our common status today amongst people of elite. Politicians and people who are officers, you find that they don't have right-hand possessions or other aspects. They have people in the Oval Office. They have people, in cars. They have all kind of profligate and immoral activities, and yet they want to point the finger at Islam. I mean, if we look at even amongst Christianity, we look at all of the scandals that happen amongst Christian elite, evangelists and preachers and Baptists, pastors and deacons, and just look at all of the scandals that occurred amongst the Christian elite and see what kind of trouble they got into. How dare you point the finger at Islam and say something about right-hand possessions? But not only that, when you look into the Bible, you find the same principle of right-hand possessions. You find the same principle of right-hand possessions. And we don't have time to go into all the verses that mention it, but it's quite clear we find in the Bible so many verses about taking right-hand possessions. So much so that in the Bible it says that God has commanded to go and kill all of the people, everybody, except the virgins. Keep them for yourselves. This is in the Bible. It's commanded to go and slaughter every single thing in town and don't leave anything living. Kill even the animals. But leave the virgins for yourselves. What does this mean? So for someone to come now and point the finger at Islam and say something about, look what Islam said about right-hand possessions. Look what the Bible said about right-hand possessions. I mean, Islam come to deal with the situation and to give it the best outlook as possible and deal with it. But after we, explain that, now let's look and see what the Bible says about it. Jonathan Mclatchie is a Christian. He's writing this as a Christian. And according to his Bible, there's right-hand possessions in the Bible. Now he may say, well, Jesus never took a right-hand possession, and Jesus never had a slave, or did Jesus ever condemn right-hand possession? Did Jesus ever condemn Moses and all other prophets, Solomon and David, for all of their concubines and everything? Did he ever condemn them? So why would you bring a verse like this, trying somehow to undermine Islam, when you have the same verses, and even more grotesque, if you want to consider that, in your Bible, where it says, kill everyone and save the virgins? How would you know they were virgins? How could you verify that they were virgins? And in the Bible, it said that they took 32,000 virgins. And then 32 of them was for the Lord. This is what the Bible says. And you attack Islam about right-hand possessions, when Islam came to deal with this reality and try to make the best situation possible for these women by giving them somebody to take care of them? This is unbelievable. The irony here. So, it goes on. He mentions more points about that. And then he has one more point that he mentions that we want to look at. And this is this idea of prostitution. Again, I mean, this is, when these Christians, when they bring these points, they use like the most despicable words, rape and prostitution. Rape in Islam, Allah tells us to lower our gaze and guard our modesty. So how could you, somehow imply that Islam permits rape when it tells us that, fornication is a major sin? How could you rape somebody when fornication is a major sin? It just don't add up. But the thing is, when you take things out of context and you bring these verses completely out of context, or these hadith completely out of context, and then you say, look, see here, this is what Islam says about this, and this is what Islam says about this, and Islam says to kill, and Islam says this, then you can come up with any kind of religion you want. You can make up your own religion and say this is from Islam, because you're taking these things out of context. And this is what these Christian apologists do all of the time. With very, very, very rare exception, this is what you see all of the time. And this is what, unfortunately, this poor gentleman in this poor article, he does in here. I mean, you can see it's a very poor read article. It's not extensive. It's not very scholastic. It's just some points to show like a shock and awe. Like, oh wow, Islam allows rape. Islam oppresses women. Islam does this. Islam does that. No, read the sources of Islam and see what it says. Watch the video that I mentioned earlier and see what Islam says. But also see what the Christianity says about these things. See the early understanding and postures of the church fathers and the Christian elite as it relates to women. I guarantee you'll be surprised. I guarantee you'd be surprised. And finally, he mentions the idea of prostitution, which is this idea of marriage. And first and foremost, it's called marriage. It's called marriage, and this occurred early in Islam when the Muslims were out for a long time on expeditions, and they desired women, and they were out, and they asked the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, about the situation, that they wanted to kind of castrate themselves. And they said, no, make a contract with a woman, but you make it indefinite. Because when you do a normal contract with a woman for marriage, you make the marriage with the intention to stay with her forever. This is the normal status. You make the intention to stay with your wife forever. But in this situation, because the men were traveling on expeditions, the Prophet allowed them to make contracts indefinitely, because they would go back to their homelands and they would leave the women in foreign places. So he said, make the contract with them indefinite. And you may be with them for a long period of time or a short period of time, but make the contract and make it for what? Make it for marriage. You make it for marriage, so that woman enjoyed all of the rights that a wife would enjoy because she was a wife. The only exception is that the contract was stipulated upon being indefinite, not something being long-term that we know when you make the common contract between a husband and a wife. But this is what occurred early on, and then later in Islam, as the companions begin to be more local, and there were more Muslims to go out and rotate and go into battle, the Prophet forbade this kind of marriage and said that this marriage is not to take place anymore. It was something that was allowed for a temporary time in the circumstances that was needed. So this happened, and it was forbidden, and later on it was prohibited. The thing about it is that the woman that took on this kind of marriage still enjoyed all of the rights that a wife would have, because she was technically his wife. He mentions prostitution. You tell me, in what society does a prostitute enjoy the benefits of a wife? Other than paying her for some temporary service, physically, that's it. You tell me where a prostitute enjoys the rights that a wife has over a man. This marriage is not secret. This marriage is not something that, he's watching if anybody's coming, or no, this is open. And it's an open temporary contract between a man and woman, because the men were on circumstances that demanded or facilitated, their situation at that time. So again, Islam is coming to deal with things that occur and giving practical solutions and ideas to deal with these things, so that everybody have guidance in every given matter. How does Christianity deal with servicemen going for long period of time and not having anybody there for intimacy for the men? You want to know how they deal with it? Just look at what's happening in the army right now. We have all these sex scandals and sexual harassment cases that's being prosecuted against the higher ups, lieutenants and colonels and the like, by the women of the army. Why? Because these men are deployed for long periods of time. 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, and they're missing intimacy between their spouse or their girlfriend. And what happens? Now they see these women in the army with them, fighting alongside of them, and they have sexual desires. And what do? Sexual harassment, rape, and the like. Or they're raping the captives that they have after they go into a land. They're raping the captives, which is another problem from before that we mentioned about the right-hand possessions. If you have somebody that's caring for a captive, then nobody's going to come and touch her, because now she is the spouse of the person who took her. But if you don't have that kind of situation, then you have what happens in the army, where people go in other lands and they rape and pillage all the women there, because there's no accountability. There's no responsibility. No one can protect them. Or you have female soldiers being sexually harassed by the male soldiers in the army. So Islam dealt with these situations, and though we look at them now in a modern time, and we look back and say, oh, how this is barbaric. No, it's not barbaric in that time frame. It's very progressive, and it was the only system that was put in place to deal with these things in a very conducive and the best way. So this is what we have to look at and understand, that there's context to all of these matters, and Islam, brings the best out of these situations. And if we study the context, then we'll see that. But if we take them out of context, then what we see is that, in fact, we have situations that may look to be very disastrous and very disgusting. But it's only when you take these things out of context that you get that conclusion. But again, we have to ask ourselves, how does Christianity deal with these things? The same things that he's bringing in this article, how does Christianity deal with these things? How does Christianity deal with domestic violence? How does Christianity deal with modesty of women in dressing? How does Christianity deal with the idea of female captives? You have a war going on right now that's happening. How do Christianity, what kind of guidance does it give in terms of female captives? It doesn't have any answers for it. It doesn't have any answers for it. And this is why you see the troops behaving the way they behave, because they have no moral compass of how to deal with the situation. And they're doing it any way that they want. And this is what happens. And now you have people being oppressed to the highest degree. Even the men are being, degraded sexually and humiliated by these soldiers. all kind of heinous activity that they're even performing and doing to the men. Disgusting. Disgusting. And then you point the finger at Islam? Shame on you. Shame on you. But this is his article. We wanted to bring this out in the video. Again, I mean, it's over an hour long. We apologize for such a long video. Maybe we hope to break it up in parts and put it into smaller sections so you can appreciate a little bit more. But, we hope that, we dealt with the situation that we wanted to, and we hope that we brought some light and clarity to the lies and the deceit and the disingenuous academia, if you can call it that, by these Christian apologists that loves to bring things out of context and misrepresent Islam and outright lie on Islam, as you've seen in the article in the very beginning. I mean, the article began as a lie, and this is just unfortunate that these people stoop to such a level. But we have to be better than that. We have to be above that, and we hope that this presentation gave light to that. هذا وصلى الله على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم وسبحانك اللهم بحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. We see you next time in the next video, and continue to support and pass it on. Thank you and take care.